He stood there, surrounded by everything he once wanted. Money. Power. Respect. And for the first time, he understood the real cost. This is not a story about success. It's about what success takes from you. The city stretched endlessly behind him, glass towers glowing through rain and fog. Every light represented a deal closed, a promise broken, a night sacrificed. He had climbed higher than most people ever dared to imagine. And yet, in that moment, standing alone on the bridge, none of it felt like victory. His name was Alexander Hale. For years, that name carried weight. It opened doors before he knocked. It made rooms quieter when he spoke. People listened, not because they trusted him, but because they feared being left behind. Alexander did not grow up powerful. He grew up invisible. His childhood passed in narrow apartments and borrowed furniture. His father worked long hours and spoke little. His mother worried constantly, not about dreams, but about survival. Alexander learned early that comfort was temporary and security was fragile. Watching adults struggle taught him one thing very clearly: no one was coming to save you. At school, he noticed something most children ignored. The loud ones were remembered. The confident ones were followed. The quiet ones disappeared. So he made a decision without ever saying it out loud. He would never disappear. He studied people more than subjects. He learned how teachers responded to flattery. How classmates respected confidence, even when it was fake. By the time he reached adulthood, Alexander understood a truth most people learn too late. Perception mattered more than reality. University was his first battlefield. While others chased grades, Alexander chased connections. He attended events he could not afford, wore suits he bought on credit, spoke with certainty even when he doubted himself. People mistook his ambition for leadership. Opportunities followed. His first job was not impressive. Long hours. Low pay. Endless pressure. But Alexander stayed later than everyone else. Not because he loved the work, but because he loved what it represented. Each extra hour was proof that he was moving forward while others rested. He learned how power actually worked. Not through titles, but through leverage. Knowing who needed what. Knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. He made himself useful to the right people and invisible to the wrong ones. Years passed. Promotions followed. Then influence. Then money. By his mid-30s, Alexander had what most people only talk about. A high-rise office. A view of the city. A calendar full of meetings where his decisions shaped other people's futures. He was admired publicly and envied privately. From the outside, he had won. But power has a cost that is never listed up front. Power did not arrive suddenly. It crept in quietly, disguised as responsibility. Every promotion brought more authority, but also more distance. Friends became contacts. Conversations became transactions. Alexander told himself it was temporary. That once he reached enough, things would slow down. That one day, he would enjoy what he built. That day never came. People around him began to change. Or maybe he did. Meetings replaced dinners. Strategy replaced honesty. He stopped sharing doubts because doubt made people nervous. Confidence became armor. Eventually, he forgot how to take it off. The first betrayal came quietly. A colleague he trusted leaked information to secure his own promotion. Alexander found out weeks later, too late to respond publicly. Instead of confronting him, Alexander did something colder. He waited. Months later, when the opportunity appeared, he returned the favor without emotion. The colleague was removed. No argument. No explanation. Alexander told himself it was necessary. That weakness invited attack. That mercy was expensive. Each decision hardened him. Relationships outside work began to fade. Messages went unanswered. Calls became rare. When people complained, he labeled them distractions. He convinced himself that loneliness was a sign of focus. Money made things easier, but also emptier. Apartments became larger. Rooms became quieter. Success removed friction from life, but it also removed warmth. At night, when the city lights dimmed and the noise faded, Alexander sometimes felt something he could not name. It was not sadness. Not fear. It was a pressure. A quiet awareness that something essential was slipping away. He ignored it. Then came the moment that changed everything. A deal. A massive one. The kind that defines careers. It promised more power, more control, more recognition. But it required a choice. A betrayal that could not be undone. Someone would lose everything so Alexander could gain more. He hesitated. Not because of morality, but because of consequence. He weighed the risks. Calculated the outcomes. And finally, he agreed. The deal closed. The headlines celebrated him. And somewhere else, someone paid the price. That night, standing alone in his office, Alexander realized something terrifying. He felt nothing. No guilt. No relief. Just silence. That was the moment he understood the real cost was not what he had sacrificed. It was what he was becoming. Trust does not break loudly. It erodes. Alexander began to notice it in small details. Conversations that stopped when he entered a room. Emails copied to others unnecessarily. Smiles that lasted a second too long. People still respected him, but respect had changed shape. It was no longer admiration. It was caution. He had built an empire on control, and control demanded distance. The more powerful he became, the fewer people spoke honestly around him. Everyone learned what he wanted to hear. Mistakes were hidden. Problems were softened. Reality arrived late, filtered through fear. Alexander told himself this was the price of leadership. But leadership without truth is blindness. One evening, during a late meeting, a junior analyst hesitated before speaking. His voice shook slightly as he presented numbers that contradicted Alexander's strategy. The room went silent. Everyone waited. Alexander corrected him sharply. Not because the data was wrong, but because the challenge felt dangerous. The analyst apologized. The meeting moved on. 2 weeks later, those numbers proved correct. The damage was small, but visible. Alexander fixed it quietly and never mentioned the analyst again. The lesson spread faster than any memo could. Do not challenge him. Trust collapsed not because Alexander demanded loyalty, but because he punished honesty without realizing it. Outside work, the consequences grew heavier. A woman he had been seeing for months finally said what others never dared. That he was never present. That conversations felt rehearsed. That even silence around him felt strategic. She did not accuse him of cruelty. That would have been easier. She accused him of emptiness. Alexander dismissed it calmly. Said he was busy. Said she knew who he was when they met. She nodded, but her eyes told a different story. She left without anger. That night, Alexander stood alone in his apartment, surrounded by art he barely remembered choosing. Expensive furniture. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A perfect view of a city that never slept. And yet, the silence felt heavier than ever. He poured a drink and stared at his reflection in the glass. He looked successful. Composed. Untouchable. But something was wrong. He realized he could not remember the last time someone spoke to him without wanting something. Advice. Approval. Access. Protection. Power had made him important. It had also made him alone. Respect is often confused with fear. Alexander learned this too late. Publicly, his reputation was flawless. Articles praised his discipline. Interviews described him as focused, strategic, relentless. Young professionals quoted him. Executives invited him to speak. Privately, conversations told a different story. When he was not in the room, his name carried weight, but not warmth. People described him as effective, never kind. Brilliant, never human. Respect followed him, but trust stayed behind. Alexander began to sense it during negotiations. Opponents no longer sought compromise. They waited for mistakes. Allies prepared exit plans. Everyone assumed he would protect himself first, because that is what power had taught him to do. The world responded to him the way he had trained it to respond. Then came the warning. A senior partner, someone older, quieter, and far less visible, asked to meet him privately. No assistance. No formal agenda. Just 2 chairs in a quiet room. The man spoke slowly. He said Alexander was winning every battle and losing the war. That people complied but no longer believed. That fear creates obedience, not loyalty. That empires built this way do not collapse suddenly. They rot. Alexander listened politely. He thanked him for the concern. He left the meeting unchanged. Admitting the warning mattered would have meant admitting vulnerability. And vulnerability had become unfamiliar territory. Weeks later, the consequences arrived. A critical partnership dissolved unexpectedly. Not because of money, but because of trust. The explanation was professional, but the message was clear. People were distancing themselves quietly, carefully, strategically. Alexander responded the only way he knew how. He tightened control. More oversight. More structure. More authority. He believed pressure would restore order. It did the opposite. What he did not realize was that power amplifies who you already are. And Alexander had become someone people obeyed, but no longer followed. That realization came slowly, then all at once. Standing in the rain, city lights blurred behind fog, Alexander finally allowed a question he had avoided for years to surface. What if winning was the wrong goal? There are moments when life does not explode. It simply stops asking permission. The night Alexander's world shifted did not arrive with drama. No headlines. No sirens. No raised voices. It arrived quietly, disguised as another obligation. He had stayed late again. The city below his office pulsed with light, rain reflecting neon across empty streets. He stood alone, jacket still on, tie loosened, staring at numbers on a screen that no longer meant what they once did. For years, numbers had been clarity. Order. Proof. They rewarded effort and punished hesitation. They never lied. But that night, they felt distant. Hollow. A notification appeared. A message from his board. Short. Professional. Final. A vote had been taken. Not to remove him. Not yet. But authority had been redistributed. Oversight increased. Decisions now required approval. Alexander read it twice. Then a third time. This was not defeat. It was worse. It was containment. They no longer trusted him to lead alone. For the first time in his career, Alexander felt something unfamiliar. Not fear, but displacement. The structure he had built no longer centered around him. The power he believed was absolute had quietly adjusted itself. He walked out into the rain without calling a driver. The city did not recognize him. No one stopped. No one looked twice. Standing on the bridge, rain soaking through his coat, he felt smaller than he had in years. Not because he had lost power, but because he had finally seen it clearly. Power had never belonged to him. It had only passed through him. And now, it was moving on. Loss is not always subtraction. Sometimes, it is realization. In the weeks that followed, Alexander noticed how differently people spoke to him. Still polite. Still respectful. But lighter. Less careful. As if something heavy had lifted from the room. He had lost nothing material. His income remained staggering. His name still opened doors. But something essential had shifted. Influence had softened. He attended a gathering he would once have dominated. Conversations flowed around him rather than toward him. He was no longer the axis. He was a participant. At first, this angered him. Then it confused him. And finally, it exhausted him. He realized how much energy he had spent maintaining an image. Always composed. Always decisive. Always above doubt. That image had protected him. It had also imprisoned him. One night, he received a message from the analyst he had silenced months earlier. A simple note. Respectful. Honest. The analyst thanked him for an opportunity elsewhere. Said he had learned a lot. Said he wished Alexander well. Alexander stared at the message longer than necessary. This person owed him nothing. And yet, the tone carried something Alexander had not received in a long time. Sincerity. It was then he understood what he had truly lost. Not control. Connection. Money could rebuild structures. Power could recover position. But trust, once eroded, required something Alexander had never practiced. Humility. Change does not begin with action. It begins with discomfort. Alexander started arriving earlier and leaving later, not to control more, but to observe. He listened without correcting. He asked questions without steering answers. At first, people were suspicious. Then cautious. Then, slowly, honest. Mistakes surfaced. Problems emerged. Not because things were worse, but because truth had room again. Alexander learned how much he had missed. How often people had protected him from reality. How many warnings had been swallowed in silence. The hardest part was admitting that none of this was betrayal. It was adaptation. He had trained people to survive him. Standing alone one evening, he finally looked at himself without strategy. Without defense. He saw a man who had confused strength with rigidity. Control with leadership. Distance with respect. And for the first time, Alexander allowed himself to change without a plan. Power does not disappear when you let go of it. It transforms. Alexander did not step away from his role. He stepped deeper into it. Not as a force to be feared, but as a presence to be trusted. He spoke less. He listened more. He stopped needing to win every room. The result surprised everyone. Especially him. People leaned in again. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Decisions improved. Loyalty returned, quieter but stronger. And one night, standing in the same rain, on the same bridge, Alexander felt something different. Peace. Not because he had regained control. But because he no longer needed it. That was the real cost. And finally, the real reward.